Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's kickstart the exciting program of today. We are very honored to have Mr. Yat Siu, co-founder and executive chairman, Animoca Brands, founder and CEO Outblaze, to share with us on the topic of evolving into sustainable Metaverse entertainment economy. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's hear from Yat.
Hi, my name is Yat Siu. I'm chairman and co-founder of Animoca Brands. And today it's my great pleasure to discuss with you all the elements of what make the metaverse sustainable. Animoca Brands has been a company that has been involved in trying to build the open metaverse really for the last 4 or 5 years. We've made over 340 investments. Some of the investments are companies you may have heard of, such as OpenSea, Dapper Labs, Wax, Decentraland. We're the owners of The Sandbox, of Rev, of Quid, of Phantom Galaxies, and a whole set of other companies out there as we try to help build the shared network effect that is, in the open metaverse. But let's quickly talk a little bit about, what is the metaverse? After all, the world's largest companies are all trying to sort of buy their positions as to what they believe is this future vision of the internet. And I think one of the things to consider also is that, most of the people in the world who are on the internet are actually gaming. In fact, the majority of those happen to also be in Asia. And we would say that in a way, our factual minds and the thought process is effectively already online. If you consider what it is that you do most of the day, where do you spend most of your time? Probably on Instagram or Facebook or playing games, effectively already in a kind of pre-metaverse. But in fact, is this the true metaverse? And our point is that only the open metaverse can be true, because that is the only way in which it can be sustainable. Let's elaborate on this a little bit. The most valuable resource, what powers the metaverse today, whether this is the kind of early metaverse that we're experiencing today, or especially the open metaverse in the future, which is powered by blockchain, it is powered ultimately by data. Data is the resource, the primary commodity of the metaverse. And it basically has the ability to construct limitless network effects, which is why data is so powerful. After all, consider the kind of companies in the world today that have all this power right now are data-rich companies, whether this is Microsoft or Facebook or Apple or Amazon or Tencent. The biggest companies in the world today are all data companies. And they obtain this data from our time, from our attention, from our creativity. Every time one of us actually ends up using a platform such as Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, we are blocks of data to them that basically are pieces of information. And just like we do as actual people, for instance, what we actually do is we create knowledge out of these blocks of information. But these blocks of information, as a human, has a limit as to how much we can construct in terms of knowledge, because we have a limit in our capacity. But when you put it into the engine of something like a Facebook, they have the ability to create meaning and information and value and network effects out of the billions of pieces of information that become billions of kinds of knowledge to the platform. And that's what makes them so powerful. But actually, we don't own any of those derivative effects. And here's the thing, we actually use the platforms and we make them powerful, we make them valuable. So why don't we get paid for that time? In fact, one way to look at it is that all of us are working for Facebook, or all of us are working for TikTok or Instagram, or the games that you play that appear to be so enjoyable, which they are, but in reality, you're adding value to them. Because after all, if we all suddenly stop using those platforms, the value of that platform is zero. So we live in an age right now where we're basically digitally colonized, and we don't believe that it's sustainable, because actually we are being serfs in these digital kingdoms. We live under the rules of Facebook, of Apple, of Google. If they remove us, if we no longer can launch our apps on the App Store, or our Instagram handle that we thought we cultivated for as long as we did, they can take it away from us at any time. And this can only be solved through a different paradigm, because it's not sustainable, because they change the rules on us. They control it, and ultimately it'll create more inequity over time. And this is why Web3 in the open metaverse is so powerful. Because in sort of Web 1, basically, which is mostly read, Web 2, which is read write, in Web 3, we have the ability to now own a piece of that, which means owning doesn't necessarily just mean the financial benefits. Owning means that you now have a right you have a vote, you have a voice, you have governance. And that is really, really important to make this sustainable, where we have a piece of the equity of the future of the internet that we're all actually busily creating. And so one of the reasons we focus so heavily on non-fungible tokens is because these are digital assets that are now open, that are constructed in a manner that you can compose freely on, just like you do in the physical world, because now this is a representation of your digital property. One of the most famous examples of this kind of property is obviously, virtual real estate. And you might ask, well, that's interesting, virtual real estate, but what can I do with it? Can I actually live with it? What are the, we live in it, what are the effects of it? And actually, the main paradigm to consider is that it is now something that you can truly own. Whereas in the other games that you're playing today, even if it's your favorite Minecraft server, for instance, do you own actually anything on that? Not really. You don't have the ability to do the things that ownership empower you to do. Let me give you an example of this in the physical world. One of the things that we often love to talk about is cars, because cars is a widely decentralized and distributed form of ownership where millions and millions of people own cars. And new industries are formed just because people own cars in a permissionless manner. Ownership generally is the platform for all growth. In the example of a car, the automotive industry is far, far greater than actually, the sale of the car itself. If you think about the creation of Didi or Uber or Lyft or tire companies, electronic companies, hiring of drivers, mechanics, all those industries that have grown because of the fact that many people own cars. They don't have to go back to Tesla or Volkswagen to ask for permission to alter the car, nor do they have to go back to the original creator of the car to make a modification or to add a value into the car. You have the freedom to do so yourself because you actually own the car, and the only permission you need is to provide a service to the owner of the car. And it becomes an industry in and of itself. And that's something that's been missing in the digital world. But now, whether this is virtual cars or virtual real estate or whatever that is, all these abilities to construct network effects and other services on top of the ownership of others is now possible in Web3. That will make it, of course, more sustainable. What it allows for is these peer-to-peer ownership economics to take place as we move from a world that is originally, in the digital world, rental, and now going to ownership. It means that an item that you will purchase, maybe it's an NFT, maybe it's a virtual land in Sandbox, can now have multiple use cases, whether it's used in different games or whether you want to, have a loan facility against it, whether you want to, basically provide other services to it. You can now do that because you have ownership in there. And of course, that also creates interoperability. And as a result, these non-fungible tokens expand into all sorts of areas beyond virtual land and cars and music and so on. Because now, of course, everything that is used to be content can now become an asset. And an asset is a platform for growth. And of course, like physical assets as well, they actually end up becoming our own social identifiers. Think about all the things that you purchase in your own life in the physical world. Do you purchase them just because of the utility? Or do you purchase them because they're something that actually you want it to say something about you, or it's part of your identity? Where you live is part of your identity. What clothes you wear is part of your identity. One of the examples we often give, for instance, is this example of, the Bored Ape and a Birkin bag, which is a very expensive handbag. Today, a Bored Ape is more expensive than a Birkin bag. But the point being that when you buy a Birkin bag, how much of it is the fact that the material is valuable? Probably very little. Everything is based on the network effect of that physical bag. Who made it? Who else owns it? What do they think? Is it famous? Do people like it? Those are virtual constructs, so they're not actual physical ones. But of course, that ownership, the reason you own that, is also something that identifies who you are, right? If you think about the kind of car you're purchasing, you're also making a statement as to who you are. Or maybe the aspiration of buying a certain kind of car is a desire, not because just the car looks cool, but because you want to represent to people that you are a certain kind of person. That's what it means to have social identifiers as assets. And in the digital world with non-fungible tokens, things like owning a Bored Ape, having land in Sandbox, has become the same effect in the world of the digital world. And of course, that means that from an effect standpoint, you can have things like play and earn now, right? Where people in the Philippines are sometimes making more money than being a domestic helper in Hong Kong, or you can have collateralization for non-fungible tokens, you can create yield, you can basically stake. There are a bunch of things you can now do that are run by independent third parties because there is a commercial enterprise around that. Now that of course creates a kind of internet, which is what we believe in the future of Web3, that becomes more sustainable, more decentralized, more distributed. And it comes down to one major thing, which is true digital property rights. And the example that I want to put here is, as you see here, the bottom 20% of the countries that have very low property rights happen to also be the countries that have very, very low GDPs and very, very low income relative to the kind of places, say like Hong Kong, that have actually very, very strong property rights and therefore have the ability to construct very good businesses and have very high GDPs in comparison to those that don't. And so the metaverse today, the closed metaverse, is at the bottom 20 percentile. People are not making a lot of value. We're only worth 10 cents or 20 cents per click because there's no ownership paradigm. There's no property rights. But once you have property rights, we believe that the open metaverse is going to construct the kind of value that we now see in the places that have actual property rights, in the top 20 percentile. Whereas you can see the average per capita increase of income between them isn't like a 10 or 20% increase, but is a very staggering growth vector, which is what we believe will happen when we all embrace the open metaverse. But digital property rights are really important because it's also the defender of our actual freedoms online, because we're no longer dependent on platforms such as Facebook or Apple that tell you what that give you permission to be there as opposed to having the freedom to choose. And of course, that means that in order to have those digital freedoms, we must have digital property rights. And it's not that dissimilar from the actual physical ones that we enjoy. You must have both. And eventually, that will then also lead to concepts around ownership, that meaning that you have things like governance. You have a voice. You have a way in which you can now decide outcomes because you are not just a renter, you are an owner. And this is the concept of what's known in the metaverse, the open metaverse, as decentralized autonomous organizations, which is not something that I will go over today, but these aspects now all become possible because of ownership. And so we believe that is the key for the sustainable metaverse, which is to have true digital ownership and true digital property rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yet, for the wonderful sharing on the sustainability of the metaverse. And a kind of reminder for those who joined the VIP tour, you may now proceed to the VIP counter for the VIP tour. May I repeat once again? For those who joined the VIP tour, please proceed to the VIP counter for the tour. Thank you.